Hi everybody. I'm just getting around to doing a video on painting a watercolor pumpkin. I had done this little practice design a couple weeks ago, about a week and a half ago, when I was playing with some watercolors, because I wanted to focus a little bit more on mixing stuff and mixing our paints, just because it's easier sometimes than having 300 colors, and pumpkins are really nice and easy to start with because vegetation and stuff like that, they're much easier than like faces, because you don't have to be exact and they can still look nice. So this was the one I did before, and in order to do this project I went to a site called Paint My Photo, and it's a real nice site for reference photos for painters and artists and designers. The photos are uploaded and donated by photographers, and most of them, if not all, are royalty free. You don't have to pay for them, you don't have to pay the photographers, but they do ask that you give them credit for the photography and you don't sell the pictures, which makes sense. I use them sometimes for when I design my painting patterns, because I can't go out and take photos of everything that I would like to paint. I found this little vignette of pumpkins and roses, and I will put the photographer's name there. And what I did is I isolated the one pumpkin, because I didn't want to get complicated on the video. You guys know I tend to complicate things anyway. So we're going to paint the one pumpkin, and I made it a little bigger. And what I do with my patterns is I print them out on vellum. This is like almost a plastic. It's semi-translucent, so you can see through it. And it makes a nice substance for putting on patterns, even black and white line work, because you could really see through it and where to place everything. So if you had to put the pattern back on, you would be able to do that easily. So that's one reason I really like using it. When I transferred the pattern onto the paper, I did it my usual way by just slipping under some tracing paper, some carbon paper I should say, and using a stylus. And one thing I want to mention is try to press as light as you could, because you don't want to score the paper. Unlike wood, you know, it's much softer, and you're going to get lines in it, and they might interfere with your painting a little bit. So try to keep it as light as you can. And I have the picture up on my computer screen for reference, so I could see that. What I do sometimes as well, if the lines come out dark, is I erase them back with, this is a kneaded eraser, which I've had forever. It's fun. It's like a stress ball. You can play with it, mold it. I make little animals out of it and when I'm on the phone and things like that. And I just pull back the lines a little bit, so just to ensure they're not going to show through. Another thing I wanted to show in the beginning here was the paper. These are 3 grades of paper. This is the dollar store paper. It's very cheap, and the problem that I have with it, I don't know if I have my painting in there. I have one in here. It's okay for like kid stuff and playing, and I had gotten some because I didn't want to waste my expensive paper on just playing. But the problem is it's like absorbent cardboard. So the paint doesn't want to move on the top of it as easily. And if you're planning on doing a watercolor painting with layering, which I do a lot of things with layering, the paper doesn't hold up. It likes to pill. You can't pull off colors as easily as you could on regular watercolor paper, on a higher quality, I should say, watercolor paper. So I got it, but I really don't recommend it, because like this came out nice. I was happy with it, but it's on crappy paper, and it just looks cheap. You can see by the coloring. It's like a dull, it's almost like a white cardboard. It's like recycled paper. It has that texture. So be aware with that. It's kind of a no-no. I haven't been impressed with it at all. The one that I think I'm going to use that I used for this design was a medium grade, I call it. I got it at Office Supply Store, Staples, I think, by us. It's Hilroy. It's a studio watercolor paper. It's 90 pounds, which is a medium weight. And it wasn't that expensive. It was probably about 10 bucks for a sheet. It has somewhat of a texture on it. So it's like in between hot and cold press. And it's okay for playing or for stuff that you're like cards, things that you're not going to keep a long time maybe. Like this, I'm going to use it for this. And I just wanted to show you, this was a piece of my good paper, which is Fabriano. It's a 140 pound paper. And this is a hot press paper, meaning it's very, very smooth. One of the things I wanted to mention, it sometimes is confusing hot press and cold press. And if you could think of hot press is like you use an hot iron to press clothes, you'll get a smooth effect. So think of hot as being smooth, and the cold press is the bumpier paper. So you can think of when you're cold, you have goosebumps and you have more of a texture. And I wanted a little bit more of texture because I like that watercolory look, that artisty look for something like this that we're going to be doing. So I'm going to use this medium. It's not really bumpy, but it's a little bumpy. It has a little bit of surface on it where the paint will sit on top and we can move it around a little more. It's not going to be like the cheaper paper where it's going to absorb right in and you can't move anything. So I think for a project like this, it's going to be awesome. And I cut a little strip off the side, and this is going to be our testing. So we want to test certain colors and mixes. It's a good idea to have an extra piece of paper around, okay? So in a minute, we're going to get going. I'm going to take a break on this just so the clips are shorter, and I'll be right back. Okay, we're back here, and we're getting ready to paint. The next thing I wanted to show you, for this project, I am going to use my Mission paints because I'm just going to kind of wing it. So we don't know how it's going to come out. I got this beautiful Mission watercolor, Mission Gold. It's the gold level set. But you could also practice with paints like even the dollar store watercolor paints, which I might try to do a project on those. I don't want to promise a lot of videos because it took a while to get this one done, but I'm just going to be pulling colors from here. I'm still going to try to keep it down to just a few, but I didn't really think ahead as to which colors I'm going to use. But what I did to prep these, because they come in these little tubes. This set is really nice. It's under $100, which it gives you a lot of paint. These are like half a pea size amounts, and there's 36 wells and there's 36 paints. So what I did to get to kind of know the colors was just mark them all with marker and put a little dot in each so I can play with them without taking them out of the tubes in there. The tubes are, I think they're 7 milliliters, and that's going to last a long time because they're so highly pigmented that you use just a little bit of color. I mean, this was the first time I filled the palette, and I still use it over and over. And what I do when I'm doing a project like this where I want to reconstitute them, because they do dry as the pans like these, and you don't want to throw them out. So I use a little pipette, and I just put a drop of water in each. As you can see, they're all kind of swimming, and that kind of softens them up, so then when I want to grab them, I'm able to do that. So if you're going to do a project that you want to last a long time, use quality paint. One thing that's really important is the light fastness. because you don't want it to fade out in a couple of months where it's not going to look good. And the missions, they list the light fastness. This information's also on each tube. You might see the little stars on the darker tubes. 5 stars means they're very light fast. Most of them are at least 4 or 5 stars. There's the odd color like opera pink, which I don't know why it's just 1 star, because it would be easy to mix it almost. I'm going to try to mix it with some other colors later on for videos to see if you wanted to get that color, because it's such a brilliant color, and the only problem is it's so not light fast that in a year it might not look as nice. So you want to consider that. But if you're just fooling around and practicing, you know, that's not a big issue if you don't want to invest a lot of money. Like I said, this was under $100. I think it was $71, and it came with this nice palette. These boxes come out and you can mix on this side if you want, and it closes. It's not an airtight palette, but you just let it dry. Just remember not to flip it the opposite way, which luckily I haven't done that yet. So that's the paint I use. As far as brushes, I find I need a lot less brushes than I do with my acrylic paints. And another nice thing I found recently is Lynn Andrews came out with a new set of brushes for her technique, and they actually have her name on them, which is really cool, knowing someone with brushes named after them. But see, Lynn's technique, for any of you who have painted that, is pretty similar to like a watercolor technique. She lays in the color and then spreads it out, and that's how we're going to be shading in that. So I guess I have both sets of Lynn's. These are the little scrumblers, and they're even nice for stenciling. They're like a nice firm dome blender. So I love all her new brushes. You can get them at her website. I'll put a link. And she also has these Rotring Tikky Graphic, Tikky, the 0.1. I believe these are refillable, but they're very inexpensive. You could just get new ones if you don't want to, you know, mess around with refilling, but they are waterproof. They're nice for Lynn's technique, and if you want to do an ink technique with watercolor, they're beautiful too. So Lynn kind of hit a home run here with the brushes. I mean, just using those is enough, I find. I use a big one for shading and the back, and realistically this size is 4, and that I would use for most. And what's nice about the brushes, and what makes them nice watercolor brushes, are that they're full enough to hold a lot of water, but they come to a nice sharp point. So you could do lines and little tiny details with them if you want. There's one more bigger one that I have in my other brush holder. It doesn't fit in this brush holder, so I keep it separate, and I forgot to bring that out. The other brush that I really like for tiny details, and you guys who know me have seen me talk about this before, is the 30 Monogram Mini Majestic by Royal. Mary Kingsland Gibliesco sells this brush, and it's very inexpensive too. It's under $5, and I've done all my lettering, like on the Lynn Andrews 12 Days on it, and all my little tiny eyes and details. It's perfect for that, and it works well with watercolors as well. It has a very short, I guess, bristles, and it's very fine, so it doesn't hold a lot of paint. You wouldn't want it for long lines and things like that, but you could absolutely use the tip of the number 4 brush for that. But what's nice, because it's so short, is it gives you a lot of control. It's almost like using a pen. So I sent a lot of people to Mary, and I hope you support Mary. She's done a lot for the art community, and I love her classes. She has classes in that for Genesis mostly. The Genesis heat set oils, but I mean, it teaches you so much on mixing and color theory and things that you that you can carry over to any type of your art. Okay, the last thing I'm going to talk about before I bring out paint is the water. I usually keep a jar of water to rinse my brushes in, and then I keep a small water for clean water, because when I'm mixing colors, I don't want to use contaminated water. So that's a habit that you need to get into when you're watercolor painting. I try to keep mine over to the side, my big jar, and I keep it on a paper towel just in case it gets a little sloppy. And I like a porcelain palette because it doesn't stain as much, though you can use alcohol to get the stains off of your plastic palettes. But I have another video that showed how to condition them so the paint will spread a little nicer. It won't just bead up, so you can see what you're mixing in that on both porcelain and on plastic palettes. So I think that's it, and we're going to be just about ready to go. Finally. It's a lot, but I'm trying to cover all the bases because I know a lot of you haven't watercolor painted before. So if I'm repeating, that's why I'm doing small segments too, is you could skip over these and we could get right into the lesson. Okay? So we're almost ready to go. One more break. Okay, we're finally ready to get started. And I'm going to start by using the number 4 floating brush. And all it is a medium-sized round. It could be a 4 or a 6. It's not as important with the numbers. The important thing is to have a nice full body and it comes to a nice point. So from our picture, we see that the light is coming from this side up here. So our lighter areas are going to be on the side of the segments. That's why a pumpkin's really nice to do, because it's really definitive where you do your lights and darks depending on your light source. And on watercoloring, you tend to leave the light areas lighter, so you have to be more aware of where you're putting the dark colors. I like to paint from light to dark with several layers of paint. I'm going to start by wetting the area that I want to tone. And as you can see, I'm not being fussy. Really, it's mostly this side, because here's where the light's coming from. And I don't want to forget up here and that outer edge. That's going to be our lightest part. Now, don't be afraid to turn your paper. The reason we're going to wet it is we're giving it a vehicle, the paint a vehicle to move on. That's why you need decent watercolor paper that will absorb some of the water and it won't disintegrate under repeated times of being wet. So I'm just making it a little bit damp. It's shiny but not soaking wet. And what this also does is it confines the paint. It gives it a place to run, but it also holds it in general to the place to run. So I'm going to pick up a little permanent yellow and I'm going to test it. You could see, you could get it darker, lighter. It's always going to dry a little bit lighter than it looks when it's wet. And I'm just going to start to put a very light layer of it on the highlighted areas. So I'm going to work on the edge of the pumpkin. These edges that you would imagine that the sun or the light source will hit. So we're going from our top. You know, the nice thing about watercolors as well is you don't have to rush, because if they dry, they reconstitute. You could always whoops, I dropped my brush. It's okay. You could always reconstitute them by adding a little bit more water. So unlike acrylics, see, unlike acrylics where, you know, once they're on there for good, you have the ability to move the colors around a little bit with watercolors. Okay, I'm going to avoid the stem right now and keep this toning to the main belly area and the top. And I'm looking at my reference photo. And if the color's a little strong, all you have to do, clean your brush, blot it, and you could pull off and move some of the color. Okay. And this goes, actually the yellow goes quite down through the middle. I know this looks like the boring part, but like I said, I wanted to show you something that was fun and pretty easy. I'm going to put some here in the front and flip it around. And then here it's starting to get a little bit of shade under it, but there's still some golden light in there. So I'm going to add just a bit in there. Okay, and it doesn't have to be fussy, as you could see, because we're going to put more color onto it. Now see, that's quite strong, so what I did is I'm going to blot and just move it around and pull it off. Move it to where I want it to be. Okay. Now we're going to go to an orange. And what I think I'm going to do is pick up some permanent red. This is permanent red, and I think I'm going to mix a little orange in here. So I'm going to put some of the red in, rinse my brush in my big water, and then I'll pull some of the permanent yellow into it. Let's see, I think I have to get much more than that though. There we go. And you can make, you don't need, you know, lots and lots of colors. You could make colors just as easily as getting a lot. Now what I'm doing, notice when I'm mixing, I'm leaving this side a little lighter and that side a little darker. And that way you have your shades right in there, and they're going to look really nice together. So what I'm going to start doing is put a little bit more water in, and I'll go segment by segment and start toning it with the next shade of orange, the lighter. See the difference in the color? Now that looks stronger. And all I have to do is pull it through. I find when I'm painting with watercolor, and believe me, I'm no expert. I've been learning, you know, just recently. I mean, I can work with it, but I follow classes and, you know, I'm kind of discovering stuff on my own. A lot of what I do is I draw a line where I want my deeper color, say on that side of the segment. And then I wet my brush and I kind of float it. So it's very relaxing and it's very controlled. You know, people think of watercolor as wild and no control, but it's all up to you. It depends how much water you're going to use with it. And the thing is, when it gets wet like that and you want the color to stay, you don't want to mess with it too much. You have to move on. You can play with it again when it's dry. But if you keep focusing and picking on it, you're going to make mud. The colors get too muddy. You don't get that clarity. Okay. And you could see my paper, because it is only a 90-pound paper, it's a thinner paper for watercolor paper. So it'll probably ripple a little, but it does straighten out as it dries. You could tape it to a board. I've done that with a lot of my projects, and then it stabilizes it. So we're going to go section by section. And I'm keeping the line thin on this segment because the sun is hitting it. And don't worry if you get lines like this. When they're dry, we can mix them in. Okay? So I'm going to keep going. I never know like whether to show you guys the whole thing or cut back, cut off and see. You might want to tell me in the comments what you prefer. I usually keep going on my videos and I kind of ramble on, but that's just because I figure if you really don't want to see what I'm doing, you can fast forward or whatever. You don't have to watch the whole video. And I'm looking at my reference, adding my color. Now it's darker on this side, on this segment, so I'm starting wider. And don't forget, this is only the first layer of a couple. Of course, you don't want to leave this like this. We're going to just blend that. But see how relaxing it is? I'm just getting the general divisions right now. Okay. Just so we can have kind of a general idea of the shape and where we want our divisions to be. Now this is the dark side, so I'm picking up more color. We're going to start a little darker. And we're going to leave that top area a little lighter for now. We might go over it in a bit, but just for now. This is drier, so I'm going to come back on this side and keep it thin here because we don't want to get rid of all those lights, but we do want to show an indentation in the segments in between them. Okay. Now this is almost all yellow. So I'm going to make a thin line. I'll just divide these out so I don't lose them. Keep your line thin. It's almost like a double float. You're going to float from both sides. But again, you want this more yellow in here, so what I'm going to do is just pick up straight yellow. And that'll keep that highlight color. Here. Okay. Very thin on this side, just to give it a shadow. And just allowing this to tone in. Now see how sheer we're going, because we want that yellow to show through more than the orange at this point anyway. I'm gonna add a little color there. You see what I mean by layering? You just do a little at a time as it dries, these sheer layers. As I said in my other video, it's almost like you're looking through layers of tinted glass. I didn't get this line. I'm going to pull that. So you can imagine if you're looking through one panel of orange glass, it's going to be a lighter color than if you look through two panels. So each time you add on a layer, it's going to darken it just a bit. And I mean, ultimately, that's what makes it look so nice and shaded and toned. I'm almost running out here. I'm going to have to pull some more. Now see how easy you just add a little of each. And they're gonna be matching shades. They might be darker or lighter, but the colors will look nice together because you're using the same basic colors. So I'm kind of just coloring in with the tip of the brush and mostly clean water to move the paint. Like, see how that has a little... And it doesn't have to be super neat. I'm a very fussy, slow, picky painter. So for me, this is like way out of my comfort zone, but it is a lot of fun. And I've really become to a point where I enjoy it. So, okay, this is the first layer. What I'm going to do is let this dry before I move on. And you could dry it with a hair dryer, but I want it to dry so that the paint will once again be confined to just the areas we want. So it's like if you have similar to this, you're doing good. Okay? We'll be back in a minute.